good layer is built upon a good pullet. So definitely, it's all about the feed conversion, just putting that thing in the body weight before they really lay egg.
Hi, everyone. This is Karen Grogan, and I'm your host today for the Poultry Podcast Show. And I'm pleased to welcome from a couple of states over at Mississippi State University, Dr. Pratima Adhikari. She has developed a growing research laboratory in nutrition there at Mississippi State. So, Pratima, why don't you tell us sort of your background and how long you've been at Mississippi State?
Sure, Karen. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is wonderful to be able to talk about myself, my lab, and my research, and what we do down here. So I'm an assistant professor. It's been a little bit over 5 years now. I've joined this university or this department in poultry science. My major area, which is my comfort zone, I would say, is layer nutrition and gut health. So we've been doing anything from pullet feeding to all the way to extended lay. So trying to understand different genetics at the same time. So my appointment is 60% research and 40% teaching. So I predominantly do research, but then while in class, I do a poultry split level course with a graduate and undergrad management of commercial layers. Then teach undergraduate rotational seminar that kind of rotates between the faculty here. I also teach advanced level, which is only focused for graduate level, vitamin and mineral part of nutrition. That course, that alternate year, I teach protein and carbohydrate metabolism. I think that's all the classes I teach. But then I also do this individual DIS project, like graduates. Yep.
Awesome. And so you mentioned your sort of main focus area of your research is layer nutrition. And so let's start with pullet nutrition because a good foundation sort of gets you started. So what are key areas that you're looking at in terms of pullet nutrition right now?
That's a very good area there to discuss here because as you can imagine, a good layer is built upon a good pullet. So definitely it's all about the feed conversion, just putting that thing in the body weight before they really lay egg. So we would be looking anything from uniformity in body weight to all the way, just not to let that pullet grow too much, like obese, like not accumulate a lot of fat because we want to make sure our nutritional program is under control. Most of the time, I formulate my diet based off of the management guide, which I formulate all the diet myself here, but still, going into that management guide and doing it. But most of the time, also, we know these are kind of also overestimated and they may not be just kind of, we try to be on the similar to the management guide. But what I do in this case is that getting a field nutritionist and industry, hey, could you please look at my diets? And then we go from there. Oh, that is so valuable information that I can put it in my formulation and then I can do that kind of research in here. But definitely looking into this area of pullet nutrition or feeding is that, we need to make sure that the skeletal frame should be built up at first, right? We always go for this bone health and all this stuff. Then after that, and I would say that by 10 weeks of age, that frame has to be very good built upon. Then after about 13 weeks, most of this, like 95% of the body frame should be there. Like that means like you have to be adding the muscles and trying to develop the reproductive tract and go from there. So in my formulation, we do anywhere from, it just depends on the breed, but then also, for example, in Highline, we go be very specific, like exactly like management guide. We have a starter 1 diet, starter 2 diet, then you go for the grower diet for a couple of 6-7 weeks. Then you go for another 6 week for a developer diet, and then the layer diet. So in case of like hand-raised genetics, so we, there has been like a whole starter diet. That's it. And then you can go to that grower, then kind of finish like in a broiler diets, then go to the feeding the layer diet. Now, another area that has been really picked up in these days, which I realized that after talking to a lot of experts in the field, is that some people do pre-lay diet. It's kind of very narrow window before lay. Some people do not do it. Skip it directly from the developer to the layer. So that's kind of something, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think anything either is fine. But, these are the things we need to be really thinking about is to, at first, starting with a higher protein, because we always need that at the very first, then go and reducing it. Just at the level that when she starts to lay, then go for more protein again. I guess these are the major things needs to look at, like feeding.
And as you mentioned, that bone structure is really important so that it lasts sort of the duration. And we do see, extended lay periods. So what key parts of a formulation are you studying in that arena of bone structure?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Most of the time, what we do in studying the bone structure and bone ash content is very simple. You do a TVA ash and look into this TVA bones and maybe a little bit in the femur side too, because both of these are longer bone and try to get that answer very quickly. I know you have to sacrifice a bar, but then it's going to be, most of us, we do that. The other thing recently, which I have been, in fact, collaborating with University of Georgia, with my major advisors lab, is the micro CT scan. We're also trying to understand the CT scan of especially the femur bones and trying to see the kind of modulation of the bone starting from that younger age. For example, as you know, the first formation would be your cortical bones, kind of more like a femur and tibia. Then later on, when she is ready to lay, then that medullary bone comes into the play, and then constant modeling, and then formation and degradation occurs, right? Because she has to lay the eggs and those things. But then we also want to make sure that our structural bone in the pullets are, we're kind of reading that number. Let's say, we need to like this number, this is strength, and then we can predict. I think this technique of CT scan would be something like we can predict, or we can even think about the intervention, so we can bring in the pullet phase. Hey, this is what we saw. Typically, this is what it looks like, and what could be supplemented. So what could we do to have a better nutrition or better growth? So we are kind of starting to look at it. It's been only two projects for the CT scan part. But then, like most of the time, what I see myself is that by the body weight, by the chicken size itself, they are very small. We cannot put a lot of calcium because there's no. But then what you can do is kind of looking into these interventions. Like it could be like, gut health interventions. Like, is that prebiotic? Is that something like a medium short-chain fatty acid? You're trying to promote a gut and then putting that portion in the bone health. So there's a lot of things. I mean, again, that's why nutrition is very fascinating. So I really love it. So it's just trying to understand that area. The other part, is really important in the pullet phase, is that also looking into this cocci effect. So one of the study we did last year, at the end of last year, was that looking into this coccidiosis effect. Now, not just from the challenger study, but looking for a kind of vaccine, which this live oocysts were giving. And they were all in cages. Pullets are all in cages, and trying to understand, because that challenge in the first 2-3 weeks of their life, right, in cage. Now, trying to find those answers, some of the answers to the questions. And we're putting some interventions, especially the medium and short chain fatty acids combination, and kind of looking into that, how they were doing one thing, or how they were helping to maybe decrease an oocyst count. And we were doing that constantly from fecal excretion. The other is directly looking into the intestinal permeability, different gene expression, tight junction proteins. Then also looking into the micro structure of the tissue section. And we got this collaboration with a veterinarian out in Pearl, Mississippi. We have a vet lab here, so Dr.
Right.
Natalie Armour helped us a lot in that. So it was a good project, and we're waiting for that publication to be out. So it's going to be very exciting. A new concept we did, though, in this study was we looked into a trickle dose vaccine effect, just kind of constantly challenging them with this to create an immunity.
That trickle dose has become pretty popular, especially in layers.
Yes.
They just have a hard time getting good cocci vaccine takes.
Absolutely.
So that, that sort of even metered type of dose.
Absolutely. And then that is very interesting to see that. I mean, the effect was right there. For example, the control bird, I'm saying a general picture, the body weight, we're just meeting the guideline body weight, but then the challenge bird, and I mean, forget about the treatment, but it's still that challenge and the positive control bird were having a very hard time, like they were catching up their weight for like 2 weeks later or more. So it's very interesting. Yeah. So we're waiting to hear more.
Great. We'll have to keep our keep looking for that publication. You'll have to let us know when it's published. Sure. We don't want to give away the results.
Sure.
And I think that's something that we have to, balance is, we do have to do some interventions to deal with, like, we need to create coccidia immunity, but we know we are having an impact. And so I think that nutrition is important to balance to try to help us overcome, some of those things. So another thing that we deal with in layers, and I think you also have a research background in, is Salmonella and specifically Enteritidis. So how can nutrition help improve or help strengthen the gut in terms of dealing with Salmonella?
Yes, Karen, this is a very good question, and this is a very question that I think industry is trying to find a solution on for a long time.
Right.
So let me tell a little bit background on what work we've been doing in Salmonella here. We've been very much able to produce a good, successful model here in our animal biosafety level 2. So we have a full-fledged BSL2 lab where we could do all these bird trial, and it could be just changeable with a case trial, or if you would like to do a floor pen trial, we could do everything in here. But yes, for the last 2 years, in fact, it was one of my PhD students' project to establish a model. So we have been very successful. And then we also have been testing, especially I would say probiotic. Yes, we can do prebiotic. We have done it too. But in my experience, in our lab experience, putting probiotic in the feed and formulating based off of that, and really getting a count if there's any, for example, we mix a feed, layers, I'll do mash feed, and then trying to get a recovery of that is very easy, and send in a lab, third-party lab to find this analysis, and at least getting a count of that lactobacillus or bacillus, whatever we feed in. And we had a very success, just to back up our study, hey, this is what we got, and we have been able to recover some, and kind of down the gut, and when we challenge these hens and looking into these interventions, I think probiotics would have kind of more successful stories in my lab. But again, of course, I have also seen one of the projects we did was combination with the pre and pro, like a symbiotic effect. That was doing as good as that probiotic treatment we had in our study. So what I'm trying to say here, it depends on different, I guess, in the mature layers at different ages, what kind of challenge you're looking for. Think about practically, so in a Salmonella outbreak could anywhere from a transfer of pullets to a lay house to all the way to she's trying to lay, like the laying age, right? That's very important because you just don't want to drop down your egg. Also don't want to have a bad effect of Salmonella, a lot of mortality, right? But then more than a mortality, I guess what it does is that, especially in Enteritidis, is that it affects the egg because that's a food safety issue, and that's very important. That is public health and that stuff. In my experience in our lab, we've been using this variety of anywhere from a probiotic, best of a different bacteria, all the way to prebiotic in their combination. So again, not saying prebiotics are bad, but really combination is what we're looking for. And then these are targeting different approaches because prebiotic will be helping to convert into breaking down into short chain fatty acids and then to increase the pH, which is not good for Salmonella. Then you have this promotion going on for a good bacteria like a probiotic, directly feeding that, and then they help each other. I guess they kind of fill the gap. The other area in this interest, I would say, is that a window of challenge. So we've been doing these, as early as day 3, fecal collection going from there, and then maybe, how it takes that length of translocation to the organs.
Right.
It would not really do that fast because there's no use to get anything out and kill the bird on day 3 or day 2. Right. But then at least waiting that window 5 to 7 days, and we've been right there always. As Devin said, day 7 post-infection, we have always a lot of number in Zika, Salmonella. And if we can have that interventions, whatever we've been using as for a industry, just kind of information right there, intervention. And now again, it's short term, right? But then also you have to think about the long life of players. It comes and goes and comes and goes.
Right.
So
that is cyclical.
That's the thing. Like short term intervention, great. Interventions is great. But then that's my question to myself too. How long do you feed for? Do you only feed those because these are not antibiotics? Do you only feed when they are affected? And then how long? I think this is the main question. Some of the studies though, let me tell you an example. One of the study that we did is though feeding these for a couple of weeks so that the birds get adapted to the diet and their system gets adapted. Then you produce this model there, like a challenge, give this higher dose of Salmonella enteritis and maybe looking that further that day 7 post-infection or day 14 post-infection, because you know how mature birds takes time to utilize everything and get adapted to it. So maybe that's what, as a prevention, again, it's as a prevention. That's where I can see these interventions playing role in Salmonella.
Right.
Yeah, but we do anything from a fecal collection, looking into the log count of Salmonella, to all the way to internal organs like secondary organs, and also doing. Recently, we've been also doing some microbiota study, looking into really forget about the interventions, but before that history of the bird. Sometimes you have a vaccinated during the pullet lifetime, and then if you can find the microbiota of that bird versus unvaccinated, because most of the time I grow the pullets here in our farm for the research purpose, and trying to look at differences. It's gonna be very interesting. They have a different set of population. Not really totally different, but some of these species we're seeing is kind of maybe that constant immunity provided from vaccination may be different. So
I've heard other people's theories on that, the bird's microbiota is going to start, based on their environment that they're, initially in.
Yeah.
And that there really isn't much that you can do to change or alter it after that point. So I'm curious if what you're talking about in terms of the probiotics and enteritis, if you see a shift, if our interventions really are making an impact on that microbiome that we all feel like is happening, or if there are other things that are making it shift, or is the probiotic just merely having an impact on those Salmonella numbers?
No, that's exactly what I've been hearing and I've been reading. The other thing is that, again, for example, just the point just you said, there are always an environment effect and the age effect, right? And then the smaller bird have a different microbiota because the microbiota become more diverse. Less specific, less diverse when they grow up. But then also the other thing is that, feed conversion ratio, when you talk about even in pullets, it stays in layers, or even in broilers. There has been research, in fact, I was talking this and 2 weeks ago in the peak meeting in Minneapolis. So
right.
yeah, there was
so you're on the program there.
Yeah, there's a paper I was very interesting. So even for the feed conversion, there's a bacteria, Eurobacter, I forgot the species. It just affects there, like they are there. Like for the birds, we have a higher feed conversion, have a higher number of allergen. Like, wow, it's already there.
Because of just the presence of that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that might be something, even especially with the prebiotics and probiotic side, looking into more microbiome and finding that answer for that bacteria would be so cool. So cool.
That would be. Mm-hmm. That would be. So what research did you present at Peak? What did you speak on there?
I was kind of going into kind of background, a little review, kind of what is there in the current trend in a pre-pro and symbiotics in poultry, but focusing more in a pullets, coccidiosis, and Salmonella publications. And I was backing that up with some of these same challenge study that we have been doing over here, just giving my lab data there to kind of showing what we have been doing so far.
Perfect. Yeah. That meeting is well attended by the turkey and layer industry. So
yes.
I'm sure your talk was well attended by the layer folks there.
It was a full house. It was good.
Yeah. That meeting has really grown. In my first job, I worked in tech service, and I used to go to that meeting a lot. And I remember it would either be halfway decent weather or it was like awful, like snow and sleeting.
It was great weather. Just
good.
Fun fact. I was surprised too. It was in April. We had a little bit of cold weather here, and then it was like 80s. So it was wow.
Yes. Perfect. You don't get that in Minnesota, so good. Well, I'm glad you had a good peak experience.
Yeah.
So I know another piece of your research has to do with sort of like calcium and shell quality and limestone. I know that I've ran across this, that like there's only so much limestone in the world, and eventually we're going to, have issues of sustainability. So I think that you look a lot in your research on, okay, what's exactly the right amounts in terms of ratios and how layers best use it. So as we're trying to preserve shell quality, what is your research shown to help support there?
Yeah, it was very interesting research. It was, in fact, one of my master's students, she defended last month, and she's starting PhD in my lab, so it's very exciting for her.
Keep a graduate student. That's good.
Retention, right?
Yes, you like to keep them. So.
Yeah, she's a good one. So we did a study. It was a 40 weeks study, and it was. So before that, let me back up a little bit. So we had a prelim study before this, like 2 years ago. A very different ratio. So you can think of anywhere from your 100% fine for a mature layer to the 100% coarse. So in that, we have 35, 65, that's a kind of inclusion, like fine to the coarse ratio. So 35, 65, then we have 25, 75, this is gaps, right? Then we have this 15, 85, and then the 0 and 100%. Particle size. So then we looked into that. I'm not gonna take a lot of time. I'm gonna have what we saw. So it was very interesting. We had 2 types of feeding. So now think about 4 different levels of ratio in the particle size. It was a factorial design, and then you have this conventional type feeding and split feeding. So what we did for each of these, we have for one group put everything. So it was a measured amount of feed. So the her hen eat like 100 grams a day, which is kind of giving every day 100 grams. So we have been very specific as it could be. So in the morning at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m., when the light comes in the hen house, pretty much student workers, they're feeding this bird as one group, right? Everything, your 100 grams is given up in the morning. Then the second treatment was with each of these different ratio I just talked about, giving these 50 grams in the morning when the light is on, and saving that 50 grams to give later in the day. So it was a very intensive, a little bit longer study, a lot of work. But what we saw, which very interesting, was 1585, your 15 fine and 85 coarse, had a very better TBI breaking strength. In fact, it was similar to your 25-75 ratio too. Now, this is the thing. We did not use superdose of phytase or, like a more phytase. And that it was a different factor, right? That was done. Then we got this result and I looked into this and then ran the data. I'm like, okay, what could we learn from this data that could do a follow-up? So then I decided to go for this because, of course, fine limestone, there's not any difference in the price. So it's fine. This is kind of how the hens utilize. So we thought maybe discussion with that previous student, 1585 is the thing to choose. And in fact, it was funded by US Poultry and Egg Project.
Right.
The second concept that I'm going to tell you. Yeah. So this was my idea. 1585, then we have this, and then we have a control industry standard, they say, like a 40-60, doesn't matter. It's just always, you can even feed that throughout our life. You don't have to increase that to higher. So that was our control, and we maintained that over in one of the group. Then the other was looking in the phytase interaction. So I think that was a kind of new concept, and it was funded by US Poultry. And that was very interesting. So in this study, the second one, we found that actually there is something when you have this phytase superdose level. And when I say superdose, we provided 1,500 FTE per kilogram. Okay. I work with one of the biggest enzyme company. And so they were excited about this data too. So, this superdose level, when you look into just only that, it did increase the bone quality. Like, in fact, we're looking more into CT scan data. So we saw that when you have this superdose level, but then with a lower ratio, then that will just be fine. But then when you have that both higher, they were not doing that good. So there is something still going on with that level and then the particle size. The other thing is that, yes, our standard level was 400 FTU per kilogram, and that was fine with the higher amount of your coarse particles. So that was very fascinating. So we had a lot of data in this study. We did all the way from your performance data. We had these egg mass collected, egg production data, feed conversion ratio. We weighed these the feed every week. So it was a weekly feed conversion. Then also we did at the end of each 20 weeks. So it was kind of like an early lay and then late lay. We sampled these hens to look into the digestibility too, and also inositol levels. So that was what we were trying to find an answer on, more in the gut health side. Like, how a phytate molecule breaks down and goes to different inositol, just to get that last ester. And so in fact, that was very interesting that in the gizzard and then in the ileum, these 3 and 4 were pretty high. So they're kind of releasing more. So it just tells a little bit more on the details in the gut side. So I think that was very interesting. The other thing is that we had a lot of, I think that was kind of not a good data. We had a lot of like unsellable eggs, which means when I say unsellable, like soft shell eggs, especially with that higher combination. So definitely I would say like a no, like really like 1585 and then that 1500 FTE. May not something that I would recommend. I mean, there could be something that you can recommend. There's some that you do not recommend. So that's what I could.
Somewhere in there is the exact right level.
Yes. But looking into the, again, going to your question of the shell strength, I could see that application being more into definitely the higher level of the course, but then staying with that 400, 600 FTE per kilogram of the phytase would just be fine. But when you want to go more into the gut side, like what's going on inside, like a gizzard, like a breakdown of that inositol and going into the ileum, who knows? I mean, there could be some follow-up there in the future. Find more there.
So then, in terms of looking for the phytate, and then so in this second sort of follow-up study, you were mentioning you measured these sort of breakdown products, but then did you also look at bone strength again with that part of the study, and did you find differences there as well?
Yes, we did. In fact, I was just going to actually talk about that student project, and I was just kind of pulling here if you just don't mind. Yeah, we had a very interesting data, especially your bone ash, not just the total ash, Karen, but going into this micro, you know how you have a mineral combination in the ash, and going to this smaller trace mineral like copper.
Right. Copper,
We had
manganese.
yeah, so
yeah.
something is going on. I mean, in eggshell, when you think about it, in a layer has an egg part and you have a bone part, right? Both are very equally important because you just don't want that mineral or calcium to be pulled out of your structural bone because you'll be lame, right? So what I would
time. Just use that bone for a long time.
Absolutely. So what is more exciting, which we never did this kind of analysis before. We used to just say, okay, TVA ash, a total ash, then you just have to go from there, right? To find the strength, quality. But then here, this time we did, okay, let's do as much detail. So very interesting is that your copper, and I'm giving the example of copper, is with our, that 40-60, which you have 40 fine and 60 coarse, and with the 400, which is our standard level, it has a significantly high content of copper. So yeah, and manganese is another one. So it's very interesting. So we're still trying to find that out.
Right.
What does that tell us?
Study leads to another study. This is the way these things work. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other is a microcity data from bone. So we look at this trabecular number. So you know how you do just all about the scanning, and then you have this total number you want to look for. And that number was kind of really higher when you had this 1585 ratio, though. That is something good part also.
That's good.
Uh-huh.
So perhaps that ratio of, more coarse, it stays longer, and then they're able, when they're laying down that, bone, they're able to pull from that store more.
Exactly. And then like we did not see any difference between our that level, even though a level increase, you just didn't, the phytase level.
And there's no cost difference because you were saying the coarse and the fine are the same cost.
Yeah. In fact, I just realized that very recently, I was talking to, hey, I thought coarse would be expensive. No, okay. Interesting.
That would be great to, I think that any fine tuning, I think we've gotten to the science part of being able to fine tune these things. And I think your research really backs that up of, okay, this has always just been our accepted ratio. Maybe this isn't exactly the best. Like we can do better because like you said, and there's differences in genetic lines because the genetic lines keep changing.
Yep.
And if they, shift from one thing to another, then, things are always changing and evolving.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think you have a lot of really exciting things going on in your lab, and it's great that you're keeping graduate students. If you had advice for students or professionals that were wanting to get into specifically poultry nutrition, what advice would you give them?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think nutrition is an area that still needs to be explored, and this is very fascinating. I'm not saying because I love nutrition, I'm poultry nutritionist. Every job, every field is very fascinating. But what about nutrition is you are working directly with the genetics. So you're going that side by side because genetics are kind of far up. They say, okay, we have done the selection. We claim that our bird does XYZ. We have selected against a best FCR bird, right? And the best egg production. She lays over 365 days, 365 eggs. But then also we're like, okay, that is fine. But then what is proven? Like what happens in her quality? Yes, we know she produces egg every day. But then what happens to that egg? Like quality-wise, like not the quantity-wise.
Especially as they get to, 80, 90 weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm saying an example of layer, right? But then also same goes with the broilers or turkeys. Like, I think for a student who want to do nutrition course, when they should know when they are in undergrad, which, may not be in their sophomore or freshman, but then at least they should know by junior grade or level, like, okay, this is what I want to do, and start networking and start going to these kind of meetings, scientific. We have tons of those. It doesn't matter. Talk to your advisor. Go do a DIS course. That's something I would suggest them to do because you learn a lot from that undergraduate project. Like at least It doesn't have to be perfect, but you'll learn how to do kind of maybe research. Then it could be a short-term project. Then you can go present that somewhere in a scientific conference. Then you get that idea, connection, how people do it. Then you have a plan. And okay, this is what I have seen, maybe a small portion of it, and I want to go and do a big picture of it. I think that's how you could just be you'd be a good nutrition student, because it's so hard to make everything teach, which I have a lot of students coming from different backgrounds. Some are veterinarians, some have done DIS project in undergraduate, right? But then also I'm saying it will be only benefit that student if that is coming from that background. So that's what I would say. And networking is very important. It doesn't matter in undergrad or graduate, even for us, right? So yeah, and there's a lot of opportunity. You can go everywhere from a sales side to all the way to a technical director side. So I think there's a lot of things to learn. And this is only happening because we have these, again, going to the genetics, we have these things changing so much. And then this industry is going so in a faster rate, and then we have to feed and make sure that's also economic. And just to there's a couple of points here, and you are trying to find out maybe a solution there. And we have always a demand for a nutritionist.
Absolutely, there's always demand. You have to feed the animals to feed the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So not necessarily from a nutrition standpoint. In terms of your journey into academia and, being kind of an early career scientist, what are some tools that you find useful in terms of like developing, like if it's a book, oh, I read this was really helpful to me, or I went to a certain kind of class, or what's been really helpful to you as an early career scientist?
Yeah, so what I do is that most of the time, so what I have learned is through this podcast. So I listen a lot of podcasts, not just a poultry podcast itself, but then, anything.
What are some examples? Like give our listeners, like what's your favorite podcast to listen to?
Actually, I don't have a name of it. How about that? But then I also want to listen like a success stories of the people. How to do a leadership, I'm so much interested in leadership, so I don't know where I would go down the road. But then I always love to learn how to manage small to a big group, and you don't know so many things. And I've not been able to do any kind of leadership course yet, but I feel like that's kind of my path to go. But what I do is kind of listen there, like especially a one-to-one conversation, talking about your personal experience. People share their ideas, and people talk about, okay, this is what has really been working and doing, and it really works. It doesn't have to be a scientific podcast, right? It could be anything coming from your personal experience. So that kind of talk, I always love to listen, and I get motivated. I think that's what makes me motivated. And I do that every time morning, not every time, but most of the time morning, and then evening when I come to work and then return from there. So the other is also managing I would not say stress. Yeah, everybody has a stress. It's a different part of it. But like how to manage a work-life balance, because you really have to find that, find a position there so that you are not overloading your work and then not like balancing your life. So that is, I don't have an answer, but that's something I
was going to say, if you found the keys to that one, I would, listen to your podcast, because I think we all struggle.
Yeah, that's what I listen to.
I think we all struggle with work-life balance. I think that, sort of everybody keeps blaming everything on post-COVID, but I think we all overworked ourselves because there was no going to or leaving work. Like we were at home and we worked. And then I think that has continued. Like we just keep doing this same kind of schedule. And I think you have to set those boundaries again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I work Monday to Friday. I work these hours, but it always spills over because you have responsibilities that kind of take like your work time. Yeah. Like you have a teaching percentage. So you teach class. That's no longer your work time. You're teaching. So
Yeah, and the other thing is that, just not wait for, okay, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 when we work, but then also think about how could you really do a better job. Sometimes, for me, for example, writing a manuscript, I would be just kind of sitting in my desk but just do nothing for, I'm not surprised for a whole day. We're just kind of writing a sentence or two. Yeah, so you just have to think about that, not drifting too much. Like, how could you do constantly making that kind of podcast, anything that would help me to build up my the professional life would be great. So, yeah, so I would not have example, but I would have some example like, movies. Yeah, how about some examples that are, again, life motivating movies? I love to watch them.
Keep you inspired.
Yeah. So I would say,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Adhikari, we really appreciate you joining us today on the Poultry Podcast Show. And I hope everyone listening has learned some good pieces of information on layer nutrition and more research to come out of Dr. Adhikari's lab there at Mississippi State. So we will look out for your upcoming publications.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you so much for the opportunity. It really feels great just to be out there and people know about layer research here in Mississippi State. And yeah, if y'all have any questions, just reach out to me. There's a personal website, and also there's a university email address. So thank you for the opportunity, Karen.
Awesome. Everybody enjoy this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.